Alright, welcome back everybody. The final video for this chapter. We left off on page 388. I think it's important that you read section 3, though we're not going to go over it specifically in this video. The same thing with section 4, the scope of agent's authority. Make sure to read through that. And also make sure to read through section 5, liability for contracts. But we're actually moving ahead to page 399 in the section titled Liability for Torts and Crimes. Now, what we're dealing with is whether an agent's actions reflect upon the principal. More specifically, does the principal have to pay an injured third party for the actions of their agent? This once again comes back to the common law understanding of a master-servant relationship. The servant was seen as the property of the master. Thus, any actions conducted by the servant were reflected upon the master, and the master would then have to pay any damages to a third party caused by his servants. The idea continues in our public policy understanding, and the book even outright states it, that a business entity is more qualified to remedy a situation caused by its agent or employee, because the business entity, in fact, simply has more money and so than the employee. I use this example a lot of times with the truck driver and the trucking company. The trucking company usually has a lot more money, has better insurance than the individual truck driver. So what happens is it usually reflects upon the truck driver to have to remedy damage caused. Because why do we have this? It's our understanding as public policy that people who are hurt should be compensated for that pain and suffering, medical bills, etc. And who's best to do it? Like I said, the book states it. It's the business entity itself. So we want to move ahead to page 400. So turn over to page 400, and we're dealing with the section for liability for an agent's negligence. There's a specific legal term right there in the beginning, and that legal term is respondeat superior. Respondeat superior is a legal term that shows that the principal is liable for any harm caused to a third party by an agent within the scope of her employment. So, if an agent is conducting themselves in the scope of their employment and causes harm to a third party, then the principal is what we call vicariously liable for those actions. Thus, the principal is the one who has to shell out the money. So what do we mean by scope of the employment? Think of the perfect example of a cashier working at a fast food restaurant, let's say Burger King. And the cashier accidentally spills hot coffee all over a customer, and the customer suffers a third-degree burn because the coffee was so hot. Well, the customer would not sue the individual, they would sue Burger King, the principal. They would do this for the purposes, like we said, because you go to where the money is when you sue somebody, and Burger King is the one with the money. Now, is Burger King vicariously liable for the cashier's actions? Yes, they are, because of respondeat superior. It's that the principal is liable for actions within the scope of the employment. The cashier was selling coffee to the individual, and that was in the scope of their employment. Now, what are some actions, and how do we determine whether something is truly within the scope of employment? Well, there's a fun two-word section that comes right after scope of employment, and I'm on page 401. We see the words, the distinction between a detour and a frolic. What are these fun words? Well, even if you take a small detour outside of the scope of your employment, the principal may still be liable for the actions of the agent, even though it may seem that the agent was conducting activities outside of the scope of their employment. The courts have considered, in fact this comes from an English case, Joel v. Morrison from 1834, that the principal is still liable for actions conducted by an agent if they were simply on a detour from the scope of their employment, but they are not vicariously liable for actions that are caused if the employee is on a frolic from the scope of their employment. So what's the difference between a detour and a frolic? Well, the book has a perfect example. If you have a delivery driver who's on his way from the store to deliver to a client's house, and the delivery driver crashes into another car. Well, that's within the scope of their employment. That's nice and clear. The principal will be liable for the damages caused to the third party because the truck driver crashed into another car. Now, for example, as the book states, let's say the truck driver decided he needed to mail out a letter to his mother on Mother's Day. So while he's driving to deliver the products, he decides to stop by the post office and deliver the Mother's Day card to the post office. Well, on his way to the post office, breaking off on a small detour, he crashes into a car. Now, is the principal liable for those actions because the truck driver is actually about to engage in his own personal activity? Yes, the courts have found, because that is just a small detour outside of the scope of his employment. He actually hasn't even truly left his employment because he was still on his way to there. He was just making a small detour. So what's a frolic? The book has a perfect example. A frolic is if the employer was driving the truck, but then decided to go over to the next town, pick up a couple of his friends, and go out drinking, and then crashes into somebody while he's drunk. That is too far outside of the scope of his employment. That is what's considered a frolic. And if it's a frolic, then the third party can probably not sue the principal. They may just have to end up suing the agent himself and going after his money for the damages caused because the frolic was too large and outside of the scope of employment. Why am I going over those two? Because there will be some questions about detour and frolic on the final exam. So that's it for the videos, folks. It's been fun doing these. I'll probably post one more, or at least try to, maybe a study guide tips. If not, I'll definitely send out an email with some study guide tips for the final exam. But that's it. It's been great. Hopefully you've liked this method of learning, with regards to the flipped classroom where we do the videos during the week. It's been fun for me, and so it's been a pleasure. But that's it, folks. Remember, I'll post up maybe a video, but maybe just a short outline. I'll email you about the final exam. But see you on Monday. Bye.